The Hero's Journey, a Mindful Accord podcast with your host, Rich Decker.
Hello, and thank you for taking some of your valuable time to listen to the show. If you enjoy this show and have been inspired by this episode or another episode, I would encourage you to join our Patreon page. For those who are unfamiliar with Patreon, it's a platform that allows artists and content creators to build relationships with their audience, while at the same time earning enough money to keep providing the content. When you join our community, you will gain access to exclusive content such as live guest Q&As, behind the scenes, and other exclusive offers. And you can join for as little as $1 per month. There's a link in the show notes that'll take you directly to our page. My guest for this episode is Orest Komarnyckyj, or Orest the Old Guy, as he is commonly known these days. Orest is the founder and host of oldguytalks.com, where he helps older guys create kick-ass lives for themselves and those they love. He is also founder and host of myjunkdoesnotwork.com. In this episode, we talk about his journey from an aimless young man who eventually decided to attend dental school and then became a periodontist, to where he is today as founder of these life-changing programs. One of the alarming things that I discovered during this conversation is that testosterone levels in men have dropped some 25% since 1970, and this is across all generations. We discuss the ramifications of that and what men can do to address this issue. It's not your typical family doctor prescribed method. We also discuss how this not only affects men, but how it affects the women in their lives. And after having this discussion with Orest, I've decided to pursue one of the methods that he describes in our talk. This is the hero's journey of Orest the Old Guy. Enjoy.
Well, thank you, Orest. Thank you for joining us on the Hero's Journey, a Mindful Accord podcast. I have watched some of your videos on Old Guy Talks and some other things, and you seem like a fascinating person. I'm really excited to hear your story and how you ended up where you are today. But let's start at the beginning. Can you tell us about your childhood, your family, where you grew up? And then something I ask every guest is, what is one principle that your parents instilled in you that you still carry with you today, and how has it affected your life?
First of all, your description of me is too kind. I'm not sure whether you're watching my videos or someone else's, so thank you, Richard. But so I was born in Chicago, and because of my name, a lot of people are surprised. And we lived in a immigrant neighborhood. We called the Ukrainian ghetto in Chicago, and basically for several blocks in that area, no one spoke any English, and this was in the 50s, and so everybody spoke Ukrainian, and so we lived there for until I was in the second grade in 1960 when we moved. I was in the third or fourth grade when we moved from Chicago to Phoenix, and probably because I was thinking about what really affected my life, and it was something that my mother did, and it's always kind of stuck with me, and it was when we had our first Holy Communion, because I went to St. Nicholas Ukrainian Catholic church and school, and everybody in the school was Ukrainian. And for that event, everyone went to the local clothing store, and everyone wore a blue suit. And my mom took me shopping to Marshall Fields. Now, mind you, we had no business shopping and spending the money that we did in Marshall Fields, because that was like, that's like going to Saks Fifth Avenue or Neiman Marcus or one of those stores now. And she bought me a black suit, and so I always stood out. I stood out then, and one of the things that made me comfortable with was standing out.
So when you moved to Phoenix, did you know English, or did you have to learn English when you?
Well,
I know you were 2, but
no, I wasn't too. I was actually in the fourth grade when we moved to.
oh,
Yeah,
okay.
no. It was in 1960. I was born in the early 50s, and so I was in the fourth grade, and but actually, Richard, because of the neighborhood where I grew up, where no one spoke any English, I did not learn how to speak English until until I went to school in Chicago, and I started to learn English in kindergarten and the first grade. So, and that was not uncommon in the school that I attended. So that was, it wasn't like I was the only kid that didn't know English. A lot of the kids did not know how to do English, and pretty much we were pretty much writing and reading pretty quickly in terms of in English. The my only challenge is that I am dyslexic. And one of the things that people may not know about dyslexia is sometimes they don't hear things like everyone else does, along with they don't see things a lot like everything else. So I would mispronounce words. And when I came to school in Phoenix in grade school, and the nuns did, and they did the best they can, but they actually had me go back to remedial phonetics because they understood that I wasn't getting some concepts correctly as I was getting further progressing in grade school. And so it was a little bit of challenge, and so it's kind of a thing that I still can't spell. I mean, for the life of me, I can't spell, and I can't punctuate. If my life depended, and I'm forever grateful for the Microsoft Outlook that will correct your grammar and your spelling.
Well, I'm not dyslexic and I can't spell either. I was never able to spell. I went to Catholic school and the nuns gave me the Dickens for my spelling. It was important in Catholic school, and your penmanship was important as well, which is pretty much almost gone now. But what was Catholic school like back then? Because I know some of my teachers slash nuns, some of them are a little rough.
Oh yeah, it was always it wasn't as rough in Phoenix as it was in in um, in Chicago. And I just remember this is obviously today everybody would be scandalized. You'd be on TV and with the video camera and everything. But we had a situation where this one of the kids, and this was in the second grade, where one of the kids didn't show up for a few days, and then he came to school and he hands the teacher a note, and this is the second grade, and the teacher looks at the note and she tells the kid to stand there. Well, next thing you know, the kid's dad shows up, and this it's kind of it's this was a big deal to have your dad leave work to punch out. You could lose, to punch out the time clock. There weren't a lot of laws that protected your job at this point, so you get fired for just the silliest things, and this and that. So he had to punch out, and and next thing you know, dad's wailing on the kid in front of the class, because apparently the kid, the reason why the kid did not go to school and did not stay at home was that an eighth grader was demanding protection money on the way home, which he couldn't steal enough money out of his dad's money, so he couldn't get the change to pay the eighth grader protection money. And what alerted the nun to, I mean, yeah, it was it was a jungle there, and, and what alerted the nun to the fact that this note was not from the father was the fact that it was printed. It wasn't cursive; it was printed.
Oh, wow. Wow. So did the nun just let the dad beat the kid?
That was not uncommon to happen in front of the class. Oh yeah, that wasn't the first. That wasn't the first and the last time.
Oh, I know. He'd be in jail now, but I remember in the fifth grade, I forget the name of the Catholic school I was at, but I remember it was I guess you'd call him a brother, but he had a paddle. It was made out of plastic, and he drilled holes in it to make, with air resistance, and I can feel that paddle today because it hurts.
Oh yeah, well, our nuns had that, not a plastic one, but they had a wooden one with holes drilled into it, and yeah, and I got to hear that used on someone that stabbed me in the hand with a pencil. So that was pretty interesting too, and it was actually, yeah, I got stabbed 5 times, and he was trying to explain to the principal of the school, the nun principal, that it was an accident. She said 5 times, and that's when she started wailing on him with the paddle. It was a lot of times, a lot of these things are like they're like one trial learning experiences for a lot of kids. You just don't do that again.
Right, right. Well, you know what? The good thing about Catholic school, as I look back on it now, is especially then. I mean, there was no fooling around. You had to be disciplined, or you paid the price, and so that discipline has served me well in areas of my life.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, and you harken back to some of the lessons that you learned, and it was. I have no, how should I say? I have no ill feeling towards any of the things that happened to me at that time. I think it was all for the better, and some of it, as I look back upon it, is pretty entertaining. It makes funny stories. And really, you got stabbed in the hand? Did they call the police? No, they didn't call the police. Nobody called the police.
There was a paddle.
Yeah, it was a paddle. Why would you call the police?
Right? They had other stuff to worry about.
Yeah, yeah. You don't want the kid to have a record. You just beat him.
Right, right.
Not to where you maim him, but just beat him for a while so he doesn't do it again.
So when you moved to Phoenix, coming from Chicago, especially in your neighborhood, it must have been like coming to Mars.
Oh, it was totally culture shock, because the area, the school that I went to was very, how should I say, very preppy. It was the wealthy school in town, and it was all, and just lots of the last names were names of home builders, on car dealerships, all sorts of stuff. And so it was very preppy. And you go from this area where people are wearing the scarves and this and that, and everybody's just all decked out. As a very very preppy. Very preppy environment. So it was a different exchange. The funniest thing was the first day of school, I showed up with a suit, and nobody wore a suit. Everybody wore like khaki pants and a shirt. It was just a total different thing. I adjusted after a while, so it was all good.
You said the thing you got from your mother was to stand out. When you came to Phoenix with your background, you said it was easy to adjust, or was it difficult? Because I can imagine Phoenix back then was different than now, but it was kind of a old west mentality, I would imagine, a little bit.
It wasn't. It wasn't. I mean, I will have to say that in a lot of ways we were very very well accepted. Even though my parents spoke with heavy accents, and they were treated well uh, in all respects. I can't say that anyone treated us poorly, and I had lots of opportunities to do things that I would not have had if had I lived in Chicago, and just lots of experiences. So. Um, yeah, lots of experiences. So yeah, and some of those experiences, I'm lucky to be alive at this point. So it's pretty funny.
Oh, I've had many of those myself.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
I was a bit of a wild youth. So when you were growing up here in Phoenix, kids want to be firemen or policemen or movie star. What did you want to be when you were growing up?
I'm trying to remember back then, and I don't know if there was anything that I really like, any profession I wanted to be. There's a thing that when you grow up with immigrant parents, everyone always wants you to be a doctor or something like that. So there was always a lot of pressure to do that. I'd always kind of had a creative streak in me that never really got fulfilled in a lot of ways. So I kind of ended up going a particular. I went college. I went to several different national universities. I finally graduated from the University of Arizona. I was on the 5-year plan. And then just for a few years, I just didn't do anything. I just did for a couple of years. I was a bartender.
Well, when you're young, I don't think that's wrong. I mean, you're going to be working the whole rest of your life. You might as well have some fun before you start that whole journey.
Yeah, I had, it wasn't bad. It was actually, I mean, it was a fun life. And I got one of the things I did get a chance to do was I got well, let me tell you, for people graduating right now, nothing sucks more than graduating into a recession. In 1975, when I graduated from the University of Arizona, the United States was in a major recession. Chrysler was going bankrupt. Gasoline prices were skyrocketing through the roof. There was nothing in terms of jobs available.
Yeah, it was a good time. I remember waiting in long lines to get gas.
So there weren't really a lot of opportunities, and I was just not really doing much of anything at that point. And I had opportunity of a friend of mine had they had a boat in Cabo San Lucas. They were actually sailing around that area, and he had gotten into a fight with his brother, and his brother just left him with the boat. So his dad called me and said, "I'll fly you down there, and if you help him sail the boat up north to San Diego area." And I wasn't doing anything exciting, anything important. So I took that was actually a great experience, and it was funny. You've been down in Cabo San Lucas, and it's so developed, and you got hotels all over the place, and this and that. And when I landed at that time, this would have been 1976. There were cabs chasing us, and we were in an 8-passenger plane. We were landing in Cabo San Lucas, and there were cabs chasing us down the runway to get fares on the dirt runway. And the only hotel there was the Finisterre. The whole bay side of Cabo was completely empty, and there was nothing there. So it was a very, very different place than it is now.
When you went to University of Arizona and you graduated, you got a degree in psychology. Why psychology? What was the appeal for you?
I didn't know the sociology would be easier.
Oh. Well, I have a degree in psychology.
Sorry, I know you do. That's why I took that swipe at you, dude.
I liked it. I really liked it. I enjoyed it. I'm still trying to figure out who I am.
Oh my God, talk about stereotypical psychology student. No, I kind of like the whole thing about human behavior, and I also spent a lot of time. At that point I was kind of a little bit kind of geeky, and I really enjoyed not only regular psychology, but I also enjoyed neuropsychology as far as the biology of psychology. And so I really, really enjoyed it. And again, there was just a lot of fun being a psych major, especially if you get especially if you get to play. How should I say? Gosh, sometimes you get to play head games with people. And I did that once. I was actually it was not at the U of A, but at a previous university. There was a social. Gosh, you're taking me down memory lane here. There was a social psychology class with a lab in it, and I remember I walked in, and me and my buddy said we walked in. There was like about 10 or 12 people in this lab group, and we met once a week. And we said, and I spent the whole time, not the whole time, but I spent a good portion of the time explaining that me and this other person are going to take control of this group, and we're going to do it by not saying anything for the next until the last session of the semester. And there's nothing that they can do it, that we will be in control and we'll be the full attention of everyone. And it was absolutely amazing for the whole semester, everyone was trying to get us to talk. It was 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 kind of funny because the more they tried, obviously the more you didn't want to do it. Had they not tried at all, there's might a chance that we might have broken down. But me and this guy were actually the center of attention for a long time. It was kind of a funny thing.
The thing about a degree in psychology, and I remember my father, when said I was going to get a degree in psychology, he goes, "What are you doing? You're going to get peanuts with that." And he was right. He said, "You go into computers." I should have listened, but I enjoyed psychology. But, unless you work out of your basement your whole life, you're always going to be interacting with people. And, most of our lives are lived unconsciously. I'd say 90% of it. So what you're talking about, that little experiment you do, that works for everybody. So I think it's important to have some basic understanding of human nature.
Oh yeah, and I think that a lot of times people don't understand that you're really when you're studying psychology, you're really studying lots of things that are very very business related. I mean, sales and marketing is all psychology. I mean that is psychology and how you talk to people, how you deal with people, how you deal with their needs and wants. All of that is huge. It's functional psychology, and the best people really understand how people function and what makes them tick.
Absolutely. So you got out. You were bartending. You got out of school with your bachelor's degree, and then you went back to school for dentistry. What brought that on? That seems like a big change.
Well, I had harbored some ideas of going to med school, and just like it is today, it was highly competitive. It was kind of like 1 in 40 got accepted, and so it was very very competitive. And it was also competitive to get into dental school. But I I was able to get into dental school. Actually, I got into law school and dental school in the same year, and I kind of took a survey of my abilities and realized that not being able to spell and not being able to punctuate would probably not do very well in law school. Would not carry
It might be a challenge.
It might be a challenge, yes, especially since we didn't have the opportunity to correct things like we do now with a lot of software programs. So I decided to go to dental school, and that was a good experience. And I was a general dentist for a couple of years, and then went back and did specialized, and was a periodontist for 33 years.
Periodontist is what?
I did gum surgery and dental implants.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I wanted to ask you this, since you were in the medical field for many years. What's your feelings on the cost of what things have become? Because personally, I've gone to Mexico to get some dental work done because I couldn't afford it at the time to get it done here because I didn't have dental insurance. And even if you have dental insurance, they don't cover a lot. So what's your feelings on the cost of just healthcare in general? And what can be done to correct it, if anything?
I don't know. I don't have an answer to that because I will tell you that to run a dental practice is a huge overhead.
Well, I can only imagine.
It is a huge overhead. It's the numbers don't allow for a lot of fee discounts, and I'll say this, and some people are not going to like this. The reality of it is that the way that some of these places cut fees is by cutting quality, and you can do that by farming out some of the lab work that you do, some of those crowns or bridges, things like that. But quality dentistry takes time and takes the best quality of materials and technicians at the other end, and also in the dental office. So to give you an example, when I used to do dental implants, I could buy an implant for about 25% of what I paid for the ones that I used. But in reality, they wouldn't be anywhere near as good. And they're not, in my opinion, they're not all equal. And some are actually horrible. And so I just didn't want to have a reception area full of people that were unhappy. and with problems, because then you're spending a lot of time dealing with stuff that's not working, which could really, really eat up your time. And this way, using high quality materials, using high quality products, yes, it's a significant investment, but there's nothing more expensive than having it done a second time, because it then wasn't done well the first time. And there's you can go to Mexico. There's lots of knockoff parts that are being used, lots of off-label stuff. It's a kind of you're out there on your own when you cross the border to get your health care done.
That is true, and I'm sure they don't have anywhere near the regulations and oversights that they have here. That's a good point.
No. Well, there's more dentists than in Mexico than people have graduated from dental school.
Oh, really? Okay. All right. Maybe, I won't go back to Mexico.
Yeah.
So, where do you think the challenge is with the escalating costs? Is it the insurance companies, is it the pharmaceuticals, or the companies, the people that make these devices? Where do you think the challenge lies?
Well, the challenge is several-fold. Is that, and dentistry is very different from medicine, so I can't really speak. I can't speak to medicine, but the some of the stuff, because of all the some of the like the regenerative materials that we use, are very expensive, and that's because they're very expensive when they come from the manufacturer, and the manufacturer has to invest a lot of money and time into products, and some of those products are not going to they're not going to be able to market. So a lot of times, you're paying for a lot of research and quality and surety, and you don't. It's kind of like you don't look for bargains in brain surgeries, parachutes, and dentistry.
Good point. That's a very good point. Well, something's got to happen soon, because just myself personally, my insurance premium is $400 a month, and so that just seems crazy.
Your medical insurance? Your medical insurance?
Yeah.
I think that's pretty low.
I know. I get it through the marketplace.
Yeah. No, that's pretty low. The question is, and this is always the big question is, yes, do you have health insurance, but does that translate into access into healthcare?
With a what do you call your portion of it? Your deductible, yes.
How many doctors are taking your medicine, your insurance? And that's always a question, is that, and how long does it take to get in? And a lot of doctors are opting out of the insurance model, because it's actually based. The insurance model is actually based on disease and not keeping you healthy.
That's very true. So these doctors, they just don't take insurance at all. You just pay them up front.
There's a group of doctors that don't take any insurance. There's lots of concierge doctors these days, which I think you're going to be seeing a greater increase of those when you start getting into the anti-aging field, or they call it functional medicine now, but nobody knows what that means. I don't think anybody knows what that functional medicine means. I think anti-aging, everybody understands what that means. Like doctors in the anti-aging space, most of the vast majority of those are cash pay. And so they don't take insurance, because insurance, well, first of all, insurance doesn't offer any reimbursement for their services.
So you think maybe the challenge is the fact that our whole model is based upon disease and not health?
Well, that yeah, and it's also based on and this, and again, just like I said, I'm not in the medical field, but it's also based on on business at this point. You're seeing lots of medical practices are being bought by private equity companies and things like that, and these doctors are no longer. First of all, they're no longer in practice for themselves. They're actually employees of a large corporation, and they will often have targets to hit and things like that.
I didn't know that at all. Wow.
Yeah, so that's happening when you see a lot of these The groups are swallowing up hospitals. Hospitals are swallowing up large medical groups. All of that's happening. So a lot of these doctors now are reporting to someone. They're not in their own private practice. They're reporting to someone with an MBA in hospital administration. They're salaried employees. Yeah. So it's the model is changing very significantly. Now, a lot of doctors in the anti-aging space, and also, I mean, I'm going to say some of the more the higher end doctors are not in that model, but most of them are getting swept up into it.
Interesting. Well, we'll move on. I just was wondering if your views on it, because I remember back in when they were trying to do the healthcare, when Hillary was trying to do it. I read a book by David Broder about that whole process. The book was mainly about how broken the Washington system is, that our political system is, but a lot of the stuff they talked about then that were going to happen with healthcare has come to fruition. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah, and I mean, there's the health system is oriented towards treating your diseases, and I've heard the cynical comment made. I can't remember who it is, but the health system is designed to let you live long enough until your benefits run out.
That doesn't seem right. I don't know. It seems crazy.
It's a conspiracy between the insurance and the pharmaceutical companies. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not. I just know I've heard that said. And that's an awfully cynical view.
You're not wrong. Did you hear about this thing going on? I just saw. I generally don't follow the news. I try to avoid it because it's. I think my feeling is if you want to know what's going on in the news, read a history book. But there's this company in France, a French company, and they went private, and they wanted to get rid of 22,000 of their employees. But because of French laws, and they were considered public service workers, they couldn't fire them. So they made the conditions for some of these people so bad that 33 of them committed suicide, and they're being tried in France for this. So that's not unthinkable. That someone has these agendas.
There's also and I think that's a horrible way of and let me put it this way. I always when I hear stuff like that, I always have a bit of skepticism because that sounds like the prosecuting attorney got interviewed for a news article.
It's possible, and they sometimes have agendas as well, political agendas or things like that. So they do things. Well, I don't know. I heard it on NPR. Again, I try not to follow the news much because I just I don't know what's true and what isn't. The fake news thing's a big deal now, but you just don't know. And if you have a news organization that has an agenda or is a corporation and they're trying to earn money, I don't know what to believe and what not to believe.
Well, a good dose of skepticism.
Yeah, I just try to, because we have this constant bombardment of information, some stuff filters through, but I try to just avoid it at this point in my life. But so you were doing your practice for a number of years, and you just retired from that. How long ago?
Yes, it was in June of 2018.
June, so very recently.
Very recently, yeah.
Well, that leads me to what you're doing today, which is oldguystalk.com, and my junk doesn't work. What led you to do that?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, old guy talks, and I'm the old guy. Is about helping older guys create kick-ass lives for themselves and those that they love. And the point of that is that as we get older, that doesn't mean that you have to be old. There are things that you can do. There are things that you can do in your life that will bring a certain amount of vibrancy. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to be like you were at age 20 or 30. At the same time, I see so many men that are uncharacteristically old for their age. And I think it's kind of sad that they choose to live this life that is, in many ways, very unfulfilling, and it's just not fun. It's shallow and it's not fun. So I work to talk about stuff that's fun. We talk about relationships. We talk about stuff that people don't like to talk about, that are uncomfortable. Not infrequently, when I start talking, the room goes silent. And so part of my standing out that I feel pretty comfortable about. But it's interesting because while people maybe sometimes go silent, they do listen, and they listen because I'm saying something that hits a chord with them, that matters to them, and that really has to do with the quality of your life as you move on through your older years. And for me, I expect to live to 110, 120. So I've got
That's your mindset.
yeah, yeah, and there's probably a pretty good chance of that. I mean, that's my gene pool is pretty good in that regard. In that, no one, with the exception of my dad, who blew it at 88, no one in my family has died of natural causes before the age of 90. I got a good gene pool, and but I'm also doing things that will really that will probably prolong my life, and not just the length, but also the quality.
Yeah, that's important because what's that saying? I think it was Socrates saying, "Health is the first wealth." If you don't have health, you can live to be 200. If you're unhealthy, it's not much of a life.
Yeah. So there are things that older guys can do, and some of them are frowned upon by what I would call traditional medicine. But there are things that I think guys can do to enhance the quality of their life significantly, significantly.
Without giving everything away, what's a couple of things that you would suggest?
Well, okay. The things that I'll be talking, the things that I think probably the biggest thing, and there's a section of it in when you opt into myjunkdoesnotwork.com. Uh, it's testosterone replacement therapy, testosterone optimization, and there are a lot of myths associated with it. And let me just say this, I just need to put this disclaimer here. I am not a doctor. Before you do anything, consult with an appropriate health professional. And this is my disclaimer. You are responsible for your own shit. We all respond differently to things. So I'm just giving it as a layperson, my opinions here. It is testosterone is what makes a man in terms of, and it's not, and people seem to think that it's about sex, but it is really about many other things that are as important as that. It has to do with mental acuity and preventing brain fog. It's a tremendous antidepressant. It allows you to keep lean muscle mass on board. It helps you stop. It basically prevents you from, not prevents you, but minimizes to some extent fat. All of those, it adds things. It multiplies what you do. Now, taking testosterone alone by itself and eating a Big Mac, 3 times a day, that's not going to do anything. But going to the gym, working out, things like that, testosterone optimization is, I think, a very, very important thing for men. And personally, I've been on testosterone for over 22 years, and I can't imagine my life without it. And just to give you kind of an example, I was in New Zealand for several weeks with my youngest daughter, and because I did not want to mess with border agents and things like that, I decided just not to take my testosterone, which I take twice a week. The half life of the testosterone intake is 8 to 10 days. I was talking to my wife, and I was in about a week into it, a little bit longer. And my wife says, "Boy, you're really negative. You're not really negative. What's going on?" And then a few days later, she said, "Are you taking your testosterone?" I go, "No, I left it." She goes, "Wow, you're really negative. You need to do something about that." So it's a tremendous mood elevator for men. At least that's what I found for myself. And so I think that's a very important thing. Now, the challenge is that most primary care physicians will not really understand. And I've had this discussion with my primary care doctor many times, many years. And I to the point now, I mean, I tease him about it right now because he's getting to the point where he's starting to really shrink down and lose a lot of lean body mass, a lot of muscle mass. So I mean, I've it's an important thing. So I think if like I said, I have a series of interviews with a world expert who's best-selling author on testosterone optimization. And if I would tell a man to start at one point in terms of his health, that would be it. That's where I would say you look. One of the things, Richard, that a lot of people don't know, that I'm not aware of, is that testosterone levels in men are going down generationally. This has been borne out. There's called the male normative aging study, which was done in the United States in the Northeast, and over a period of 30 or 40 years, they looked at men's average testosterone levels, and they are going down significantly. Now, this is important to understand, is that when you are looking at lab values, you are looking at the averages of men. And the most recent averages for men in some of the major lab companies have been downgraded by, the high has been dropped by 25% and the low range has been dropped by 25%. So what used to be considered normal can now be, if you're at the higher end, can be considered high. And what used to be called below now falls into the normal range.
Do they have any idea why this is happening?
Well, there's several ideas, and it does not have to do with people getting fatter, because they've kind of worked that out of the statistics. But there's many things like there's what's called endocrine disrupting compounds, a lot of like the hormones that we get in our food, the plastics that we're exposed to, the radiation that we're exposed to. All of those are basically putting an assault on men and their testosterone levels. It is not, and that in of itself is causing all sorts of problems. Urologists are routinely reporting that younger and younger men are showing up in their clinics with erectile dysfunction.
Because of testosterone.
Right. So a lot of it because of testosterone. Some of it has to do with porn. But younger and younger men are showing up with ED problems in their offices. And and not only that, but this is according to the World Health Organization. They had they looked at from, I believe, is 1990, in the 90s, the late 80s or the early 90s, for a period of about 30 years. Not only is testosterone going down, but sperm counts are going down in men, and they've dropped over that period by 50%. And there is a study out of Hebrew University that says, that basically looked at this and said that if this trend continues, most men in the industrialized world will be impotent by 2050, 2060.
It's shocking. And the belief is that it's environmental factors.
A lot of it, huge environmental factors in this particular area.
It would have to be something like that because we don't evolve that quickly.
No. Yeah. So there's all sorts of things. So, some people say it's societal, and there's also certain societal components about, and I do believe that there's a war on men going on. As far as the sperm counts, it's between 1973 and 2011. And that's pretty alarming rate. I mean, that's not that 1973, 2011. That's not a lot of time. That's a scary statistic. The median testosterone levels are also, as I said, going down significantly. So there is an assault, not just a social assault on masculinity, but there's an environmental assault on masculinity that's going on.
This might sound out there, but maybe nature's way of in a weird way of cutting down on this explosion in population.
Well, I'm not sure. The only part of the world that the population is exploding is in third world countries. It's not the matter of fact, population is not exploding in Europe, and it's not really exploding here in the United States. It's only in undeveloped countries that's really exploding.
Yeah, that's true. I know that testosterone is a big factor. I just turned 51 a few months ago, and I like to work out. I like to go to the gym and lift weights, and I know you do too. So I've been doing it off and on since I was 15. But I have noticed over the last couple of years, as I've gotten older, the recovery is much more difficult, and I believe it's associated to testosterone. Does that sound reasonable to you?
Oh, I think it very much, very much. And and quite frankly, I know that for me personally, that the effect that testosterone had on me when I was in my 50s is not the same as going to be in my 60s. That's just part of the aging thing. But I think that like I said, if I had to point men in one direction to look at something that could really alter the course of their attitude, which affects everything, that would be it.
Yeah, it's something when you think about, like, they say, well, older guys get grumpy. Maybe that's part of it, right?
Oh, you believe me. Yeah, I was a perfect example of that when I was in New Zealand with my daughter. Older guys get grumpy, and I'm believe me, I'm not a grumpy guy. That is just not my operating system. But yeah, guys do get grumpy, and they get grumpy also because they're everything hurts, and they're lower mass and muscle mass, and the next thing you know, they fall and they break a hip, and they're using a walker, and next thing they're in a wheelchair, sitting at home, homebound, and the depression just continues on and on. That's a big factor.
Well, that's interesting. And that information's on myjunkdoesn'twork.com.
Yeah, that's in there. You get further deeper into that, and you get it. So and myjunkdoesn'twork.com. That's one of those things that I start talking about, and the room tends to go silent. Guys don't sit around and talk about, oh, my junk's not working. How about yours? And it's not so much completely not working sometimes, because this has it kind of has a trajectory that starts off with kind of like, well, having a little problem, not as hard as I used to be, this and that, da, 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 da. And then it kind of starts working like compounding interest. And then you got from where we're having just a little bit of problems in the bedroom to where it's actually just a full blown total dysfunction. And so what I've done with myjunkdoesnotwork.com, I've done a series of interviews with expert doctors in this area. These are doctors, like I mentioned earlier. These doctors do not take insurance. They're all cash pay. And I've done extensive interviews about cutting edge medical therapies with them. And I go into great detail. We go into great detail because I'm not doing it when they're sitting in their office, busy trying to get to the next patient or whatever. I have them where things are quiet, and we can sit down and we can have a lengthy conversation about these various therapies. What someone who gets this information will be able to do this in the comfort of their home without embarrassment. You don't have to spend time to go to the offices and fill out forms. You can get a good overview of the therapies that are out there. And then you can sit down and ask when you go to see a doctor, then you are prepared and you can ask the questions about what do you think is best for you. And for some men, it's just a matter of, they're just having some problems. Maybe the ED meds aren't working, or they're tired of taking the ED meds. The ED meds are kind of funny. There's only with the Cialis has a longer window of opportunity, but like Viagra, you got about 3 to 4 hours. So yeah, so it's and again, this ED is a factor in terms of depression. People tend to be withdrawn. Men won't talk about it to their significant other. Oh yeah, everything's fine. They generally, a lot of times they won't talk to their doctor, or their doctor may not know what to do once the ED meds stop working. And obviously, they rarely will men talk to other men about this. I mean, that certainly is probably the rarest event.
You're the first conversation I've ever had with another man about it ever in my 51 years.
And so this is, like I said, this is a way to find out about it in privacy of your own home. And I have a good time with the doctors. I mean, we talk about a lot of funny stuff, and we get into the detail of this stuff so that we can actually so you can actually start the healing process. Because it not only one of the interesting things, Richard, is that there's several Facebook groups that I kind of follow on this topic, and I will tell you that 30 to 40% of the people posting in these groups are the women. It affects both people in the relationship, and for the woman, they may wonder, does he still love me? Does he still find me attractive? Is he having an affair? Has he substituted me with porn? All those things will affect the relationship. And ED is a factor in 20% of divorces.
It's not just sex, like you said. It's also your mood and your disposition and everything else.
You distance yourself. You stop talking. You stop communicating. You're no longer outgoing. There's loss of physical and emotional intimacy. All those things are a result of ED. All those things happen. As I said, people, especially men, will tend to just shut down and say, there is no hope. This is just the way it is, and I just have to gut it out, and that's all there is. And the reality of this, we live in a time that there's tremendous opportunities to treat this in ways that are relatively easy. They're out there. There's several different things that are out there that you can do. It can be a game changer in a relationship. It can be it more likely than not would be a game changer in a relationship.
Well, I will check it out. I'll have the links for both your sites in the show notes. But I'm very interested in that because, again, I noticed that as I got older, the testosterone, something happened, something changed in, and I was just assuming it was testosterone. So yeah, I'm living. I see it. So let's take care of it now instead of later, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why not get it early and enjoy the benefits rather than get it late and have all these years pass by that you suffered needlessly. I was just so lucky to have had some friends, actually a friend who was in this space very much, and he basically turned me on to this when I was 45. My wife had our first child at age 45. I was basically the shape of a watermelon. I was 240 pounds, and my waist and my age were the same, and my waist was outpacing my age. It was a decision I had to make. Am I going to be a granddad in my kid's life, or am I going to be a dad? The vitality. As I said, people think it's about sex, but it's really about its vitality, lean muscle mass, your attitude, your mental acuity, your attitude about being able to get stuff done is probably one of the biggest things.
Well, thank you for doing that. I mean, that I had never heard of anything like this. So thank you. Personal and anyone that listens to this that may be in the same boat or will be if you're a man, and you may be even the younger guys may be starting to experience it. Like you said, it's becoming an issue.
There's with all these endocrine disrupting compounds, this is becoming more and more of a problem for younger and younger men. And the whole, I want to kind of say this is I think there's a mischaracterization of things. There's a mischaracterization that people use the expression that men are being feminized. And that is totally incorrect. I just, every time I hear that, I say, no, that's not correct. Because first of all, women are not weak. We've all been on the receiving end of an estrogen storm. That's a pretty interesting experience. And what it is that when men suffer with low testosterone, they become eunuchs. They're not feminized; they become eunuchs, and that means that they're a shallow version of what they used to be.
You're outspoken on a few things and politics from watching some of your videos and your content.
So now we're going to talk about something easy. It's not politics to be easy to talk about.
Yeah, but they can go to your site and get all the information, right?
Right. And not only that, but you'll laugh. See, on my site, you'll see things like see the old guy goes places because I have no problems talking about stuff. What old guys need to know about menopause. I just reposting an interview I did a few weeks ago with a doctor on vaginal atrophy and vaginal rejuvenation with a gynecologist. She and I had a hoot.
I didn't watch that one, but I saw it.
Yeah.
It made me uncomfortable reading the title, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I know that's when you're uncomfortable. That's what you should go for.
Right. Yeah, that's something you definitely need to watch.
Yeah, you know, because I mean, most guys don't know that a lot of women suffer with urinary incontinence, and that is especially true for women that have given vaginal births.
I didn't know that.
Didn't know that. Yeah, if you watch that interview, you'd know that.
It's like the erectile dysfunction. It's something that's not talked about because it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, but the uncomfortable stuff is where the magic is to improve the quality of your life.
You touched on something. You mentioned war on men. What is this war on men, and who's waging it?
Well, I think first of all, it's being waged a lot of times, mostly at government-funded re-education camps, which some people know them as universities. So you can. I'm sure with that statement, everyone figures out where I stand. I just think that there's so many things that you now you have to worry about saying and doing and this and that. And quite frankly, I'm just, at this point in my life, I don't care. I really don't care. I mean, I've been called, was it patriarchal, mansplaining, manspreading, misogynist, all sorts of things. And quite frankly, I don't care. And part of the reason I don't care is that I don't think that my views have to do anything with about disrespecting a woman or who they are. But I recognize that we are different. And that's the beauty of it, is that we are different.
I wonder too. We've gotten very so sensitive about everything, and then like, well, don't say this, don't say that. I mean, we used to live in caves, man, but we can handle a lot more than you think. If somebody says a couple of bad words to you, you'll live, you'll be all right. And if it bothers you, don't listen.
I think it's hysterical when people go into these like, when they have all these, when they have a conservative commentator, and then the college students need to have cookies and milk and comfort animals because somebody came on their campus and spoke about stuff that they don't agree with. Oh, come on, give me a break.
Right.
Give me a break. Yeah, yeah. It's just like this kind of attitude is not going to prepare you for life. Go ahead and spend some time in a third world country, and you'll realize how great you have it here. And just because somebody says something you don't agree with doesn't mean that you have to go into a crisis mode and seek emergency counseling session, counseling with a crisis intervention therapist. I mean, it's just totally insane. So the whole concept of being a victim is becoming kind of an accepted norm where, I don't know, it wasn't good to be a victim. That was like the thing that did not want to be. But now it's like, oh, everybody assumes victimhood and says, oh, what you said offended me. Well, tough shit. I'm offended by your being offended. Where's that get us?
I agree with you. If you look back in history, just 100 years ago, and the life that people lived, especially on farms, they had no electricity. I mean, and the women and the men, what their lives were compared to what is now. This is nothing, man. You've got everything. You got electricity. You've got a thing that you can connect to the unbelievable amount of information in a second. There's no. What are you crying about, right?
You never have to leave home. I mean, Uber will deliver all your food. Walmart will deliver your groceries. You can have everything's done. You never have to leave your home. You'll be safe at your home, maybe. It's this whole thing, and I was watching something on TV the other day, and it's such a sad commentary. There was a fight between some family members at Disney World or Disneyland. It was one of the Disney parks. I can't remember which one. And instead of like stepping in and like trying to separate them, and it was like, people being, guy beating on a woman, women beating on each other, this and that. Instead of guys stepping in and saying, hey, it's not cool, stop that. Everybody's got their damn phone out videotaping this. Well, what the hell's going on? It was like, you're videotaping this while somebody's getting the shit beat out of them. You're videotaping it? Really? What does that say about you as a person? It's just everyone wants to take out their video, their phone and videotape it. It's kind of like that's a thing that we're training people to not take care of stuff. Everything has to go to the police and becoming a felony. Everything goes to the principal at the school, and people get kicked out of school for defending themselves. It's insane. I remember this was a while back. This kid was being bullied. I mean, he was being hit by some other kids, and he turned around and started to defend himself. And all of a sudden, somehow he got into trouble. I don't get it.
Well, the best way to deal with a bully is to hit back, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
That might not be PC, but that's the truth. It's human nature. That's for those that disagree with it. Go out and study other primates, right? We have to remember that we evolved from primates. So a lot of our behaviors, especially the base behavior, the seven deadly sins, all that is primate-based behavior. So that's how you solve problems that way. We have this cognitive mind that we should be above that, but most of our lives are unconscious. So, deal with a bully by hitting back. That's what I say.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I mean the reality of this is that we're not cognitive people. Anyone that knows anything about marketing and sales and decision making understands that we make our decision on an emotional basis, and then we find the reasons to justify it. You do not need that $300 pair of sunglasses. You don't need to have dinner at that really, really fancy restaurant. There's a lot of things that we make our decisions, and then we, like I said, then we justify it. Well, I deserve it, whatever. I worked really hard, so I should go and celebrate. All those things. So we make our decisions on an emotional basis, and then we find reasons to justify it.
And that's going to become more and more and more with the advancement in technologies. That someone's going to be trying to hack into you all the time. That's kind of what I'm doing with my company. That's the approach I'm taking. Listen, if you don't know yourself a little bit, even just a little bit, and know your thoughts a little bit, you are going to be a puppet.
Yeah.
Because someone is going to be hacking into you because it works. It's time tested. It's just going to be a part of our everyday life.
Yeah. And people are getting a lot better, and you're bombarded all the time with messages. So, people are getting very clever they're getting very, very good at it.
Right. So I wanted to ask you something. So I have this gentleman who's older, and he's kind of, I don't want to say I guess he has kind of given up on life. He's not happy, and you mentioning the testosterone, that could be something I could mention to him, but he's kind of throwing in the towel on life and just kind of waiting for death. What would you say to that guy, or what should I say to him?
Well, there's a thing, Richard, that you can't save someone unless they're willing to be saved. First of all, I think that the thing that, if you want to sit down and talk to this person, is that you really figure out what they're missing out on first. And you spend your time on talking about the things that they used to be able to do that they can't do anymore, and how that's affecting their life. And I think that once people understand that, then there's an opportunity to show them a path to things that can open up their life. But the human nature, again, is that we will do all sorts of things to avoid pain, and most of us will not do a lot to gain pleasure. But we will do all sorts of things to avoid pain. And so I think that for somebody like that, a lot of it has to do with it, that people get used to pain. People get used to a certain level of life, especially if that basically loss of their vitality comes on slowly. They actually don't even know what's happening. I think for a lot of men, they actually don't even know what's happening. And then one day they just wake up and they go like, "Oh gosh, I've gotten really old." It just all of a sudden it's like a realization that they have, and then they like say, "Okay, well that's just the way it is." As I said, a lot of times your doctor's not going to, I have this thing, I have this theory about doctors. It may be horrible or whatever, and call me a horrible person, that's fine. But I have two kinds of doctors. I have my disease doctors, and I have my anti-aging doctors. And my disease doctors, you know what? If they're fat, if they don't take care of themselves, whatever, blah, 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 I don't care, because they're really good at treating a disease. They may be really good they may be good cardiologists, maybe a good surgeon, they may be a good orthopedic surgeon, they may be very good at that. But when I'm looking at my doctors that I want to keep me healthy, that, they better look like I want to look. They better live that life. And so that's kind of one of my things about picking doctors, especially if you're looking for a doctor to help you with things like testosterone, with anti-aging stuff, because there's lots of other things outside testosterone. But you look at him and say, like, okay, is he or she living that life that I want? Are they an example, or are they just sprouting off theory and they don't have a clue? But that's kind of how I pick my doctors.
This has been an extremely enlightening conversation for me, and I mean that deep sincerity. Thank you for doing what you're doing. And we need to get you some more people hear what you're trying to say. That's part of why we're doing the show. But do you have any things you'd like to say, parting words?
The fact is that as an older man at this time, there are so many options to improve the quality of your life. There's so many things that are out there, and and we all react differently. So I will not tell you that the same thing that works for me will work for you, but they'll be close. They probably will be close, but we all respond differently. And it's a matter of finding the right people, in this case, the right doctors or the right fitness experts or whatever, to guide you through this space. You are not going to find this on your own. You will not discover this on your own. I have certain people that I watch, that I listen to, that I follow. Sometimes I have something to offer to them. Sometimes they have something. A lot of times they have something to offer to me. But by being in this space, by being in this self-improvement space, both physical and mental, you can change the quality of your life, the course of your life, and the life of those that are important to you. Because this just like ED that affects both people in the relationship, the quality of your life, the quality of your health, both physical and mental, not only affects you, but it has an impact on your family.
Well, thank you. Get busy living, right?
Yeah.
Get busy living. Well, thank you for being on the show. This is, as I said, this has been incredibly enlightening for me, and thank you for doing what you're doing.
My pleasure, Richard, and thank you for having me on. And I'm going to just make one pitch again here for myjunkdoesnotwork.com. You're going to have it in the notes. There's just so many things that are now available that there's no reason for a man to suffer and be embarrassed. There's absolutely none. Even if you've had severe damage like a prostate removed or prostate injury or some other traumatic event, there are a number of different therapies that are out there, and I would be stunned. There's always the exception. There's always like the 0.1%, but the reality of this is that one of those is going to work for you.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you again for being on the show.
All right. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you again for listening. And please leave any comments or suggestions. We're always looking for ways to improve our show and make it the best show it can possibly be. Visit mindfulaccord.com, where you can find additional episodes and you can follow our blog. We give some helpful information on mindfulness, meditation, and just ways to manage our everyday stressful lives. And most importantly, if you know of a friend or a family member that would benefit from this story, please share it with them. Until next time, I'm Rich Decker.